Welcome to the Manhattan Project. This is day 28. So tonight I went to go see Tulip Fever at the fan favorite Angelica Theater. Why don't you check that out?
Pretty psyched for Tulip Fever.
Tulip Fever is a new sort of romantic drama / thriller released in the Weinstein Company. It's about a young woman played by Alicia Vikander who gets married off to an older man, Christoph, Waltz, who really wants her to have a child with him. But she also falls in love with this painter played by Dehaan. Things get messy when people try to have babies for each other, and they're also cheating. And there's also a lot of money to be made in the tulip trade. Take a look at the trailer.
You've caught my wife's beauty as well as her innocence and purity.
You do love me.
Yes, I love you. I made a plan to save us both.
You really think you'll carry this off? Tulip Fever.
Evan, what possibly could your expectations have been for this movie? Honestly, until the reviews came out, I didn't have very many expectations for this movie. I didn't know much about it, other than that it was a little bit steamy and it was a period piece. But then I saw that it had a 12% on Rotten Tomatoes, which always gets me excited. It's why we go to do the devil's advocate stuff that we do. So I was morbidly excited, but also kind of just dreading it. Tulip Fever is an example of a movie that probably looks great on the page and has a whole bunch of shit going on in it, but just is completely unengaging from start to finish. I'm sure a lot of people will blame the movie's sort of blasé, faux prestige look and editing on the Weinstein brothers meddling with the film. It starts with a voiceover that you just know is inserted in post, and there's certain clumsy editing things where you feel like they tried to just cut down the movie and make it shorter and more streamlined, and I can't necessarily speak for that. I can guess it, but I can't comment on it. What I will say is that the script is chock full of stuff. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of details about the setting, someone did their research, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of metaphors that power the tulip. Like, boy, they keep cutting to the tulip after a scene, and you're like, oh, I guess the tulip is, commentary on the way people had a relationship between God and how God governed their sexuality. You can only have sexuality to procreate, and that's like this very sacred thing. You're supposed to have babies. It's like, oh, no. The flowers, of course, represent sexuality. It's George O'Keeffe, the vagina. Or, oh boy, the flower represents just basically anything you want it to. Which, probably made the script seem really awesome when you read it. I know it was written in part by Tom Stoppard, who's a really good screenwriter and normal playwright. But once again, just some of the execution of it just saps a lot of the energy out of it. Not to say the movie's horrible. I thought that the actual just period element of it was done pretty well. Even though this movie probably didn't have a huge budget and you could tell that they only used a couple locations, it still felt like this is Amsterdam in the 1600s. Having a lot of actors, I think, helped. Having a pretty big cast, and you have Zach Galifiankis is in here for like a random cameo, in addition to the main Christoph Waltz, Alicia Vikander, Dane Dehaan thing. Plus, there's like this maid character, so there's a lot of stuff going on, which at least gives the movie that edge, that it feels like it's a little bit bigger budgeted than it probably was. And, just the prod design is good, the costumes are good. I could see Harvey Weinstein paying off the right person to get this movie, Golden Globe nomination in one of those categories. But outside of that, it just doesn't really click. When there is some of the romance stuff, it is surprisingly steamy, there's people humping each other, but then that dies off so quick and gets into this weird pregnancy plot. There's basically the idea that Alicia Vikander can't get pregnant for her husband, but her maid gets pregnant, so they're going to do a fake thing where Alicia Vikander pretends to be pregnant, while the maid stays actually pregnant, and then they can do a baby switch and all this other stuff, and it's just like, I don't know, are we supposed to believe any of this? Like, what's the stakes here? Are we supposed to hate Christoph Waltz or like him or not? By the end of the movie, he's pretty sympathetic, but in the beginning and middle, he's just kind of bumbling and like almost an asshole. It's hard for him not to be an asshole because he's Christoph Waltz and sounds German, while of course everyone else sounds English, unless you're Alicia Vikander, who sounds Swedish. They just didn't care when it comes to accents in this movie. The movie also loses points for some of the final stuff with the tulip trade, mainly because it's predictable. It feels very obvious that things aren't going to work out, and you know exactly why. or you don't know exactly why until the scene before when they say, hey, let's hope this thing doesn't happen, and you're like, well, I guess that thing's going to happen. That particular aspect of the film is not very sophisticated. There's an earlier subplot involving another guy and his tulip stuff, and that was at least surprising because you don't know what they're going to do with it. But the main stuff, just, you know it's not supposed to work out, so it doesn't. Well, the last comment I can make about this movie is that it was based on a book, and it definitely feels like it's got that based on a book thing, especially with the voiceover, with the way that it like kind of tries to shoehorn in spanning multiple generations, a whole bunch of stuff. And it's a poor adaptation. The book might be good, but honestly I feel like the book is kind of shitty, and they just thought that it might be the type of movie that appeals to the type of audience that liked that book, but it doesn't really feel like the type of movie that any audience is going to like. On the whole, Tulip Fever is like potpourri. I don't really get why people like potpourri, because I think it smells really strong, gives me a headache. That's Tulip Fever. I'll give it a 1.5 out of 4. It's not horrible. It's fairly watchable. Like I said, it's just very unengaging. Dane Dehaan looks the part to a T, this painter fella, but he's pretty miscast. Alicia Vikander is just too good for the role. Like, she puts in a good performance in scenes that aren't worth enough. Like I said, Christoph Waltz, you don't know how much you're supposed to like him or not, so just scene after scene of like, well, that happened, which isn't a great movie thing, even if I'm occasionally surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised to learn about the tulip trade. That was my one takeaway, other than just the general period costumes. This has been the Manhattan Project. Thank you guys so much for watching. We review movies every single day, give our genuine opinions on them. And we'll be back tomorrow then. And then, of course, the next day, and the next day, and then...